सुखदम् केवलं ज्ञानमूर्तिम् द्वन्द्वातीतं गगनसदृशम् तत्त्वमस्यादिलक्ष्यम् एकं नित्यं विमलमचलं सर्वधी साक्षिभूतम् भावातीतं त्रिगुणरहितं सद्गुरुं तं नमामि. Shivom friends, today we are going to read chapter 82 onwards, and in chapter 83, sage Vitavya continues his self-inquiry, admonishes mind, and arrives at soul. Vasishtha continued, "Hear now, Ram, how Vitahavya, the great sage of enlightened understanding, silently reasoned with his unmanageable senses. I will tell you openly what he secretly admonished to his senses. By hearing his exhortations, you will be set above the reach of my misery. Vithavya reasoning. O my senses, I know your inherent qualities work only to create our misery. Therefore, I pray, give up your intrinsic natures for the sake of my happiness. My admonitions will annihilate your false actualities, which are no more than creatures of ignorance. The mind's amusement with the springing up of its senses causes fury and fever heat, just as lightning or fire burns oneself or others in its flame. The mind being disturbed and bewildered makes restless feelings and sensations flow and fall to it with the fierceness of turbulent rivers falling to the sea, which it breaks out and runs in the form of foam and froth onto the shore. Sensing minds burst forth in passions of their pride and egoism, clashing against one another like conflicting clouds and falling in showers of hailstones on others' heads. The anxieties of prosperity and adversity are the tormenting sores in the mind's breast. They pierce and perforate hearts to such a degree as if intent upon uprooting hearts from their innermost recesses. They are attended with hiccups and labored breathing in the chest, with groaning and sobbing in the lungs, like hooting owls in the hollow of withered trees, whether covered with tufts of moss on their tops of or resembling white-haired heads on the dried trunks of old and decayed bodies. The cavities of the heart inside the body are perplexed with crooked hairs resembling the folds of snakes, white hairs like hoar frost hanging over the head, and apish wishes lurk about in the caves within the heart. Greed is like a dancing stork, clattering her pair of sharp bills, then pulling off their eyes from their decayed frames, as also the intestinal cords of the body. Impure lust and lawless desire, symbolized as the filthy cock, scratches the heart as his dunghill and sounds shrill on this side and that. During the long and gloomy nights of our ignorance, we are disturbed by fits of phangy bursting like a hooting owl from the hollow of our hearts. We are infested by passions barking in our bosoms like Vetal demons in charnel domes and funeral grounds. These and many other anxieties and sensual desires disturb our rest at nights like horrible pishach monsters appearing in the dark. But the virtuous man who has rid himself of the gloom of ignorance beholds everything in its clear light. He exults like a blooming lotus at the dawning light of the day. His heart is clear of the cloud of ignorance and glows as the clear sky unclogged by fogs and mists. A pure light envelops the heart after the flying dust of doubts has been driven from it. When doubts cease to disturb the mind with gusts of uncertainty, it becomes as calm and still as the dome of the sky and the face of a city after swirling wind have stopped blowing. Mutual friendship and brotherly love purify and cheer the heart of everybody. They grow the graceful trees of concord and cordiality, just as plant brings forth their beautiful blossoms and stamens in the spring. The minds of ignorant and unskillful men are as insubstantial as a barren waste. They are shriveled with cares and anxieties, just as a lotus bed is withered under shivering cold and ice. After the fog and frost of ignorance are dissipated from the atmosphere of the mind, it gains its glaring luster as the sky gets sunshine after the clouds disperse in autumn. The soul, having its calmness, is as clear and cheerful and as deep and undisturbed as the deep and wide ocean, which regains its calm and serenity after the fury of a storm has passed over it. The mind is full with the ambrosial nectar of everlasting happiness, just as the roof of heaven is filled with the nectarous moonbeams at night. After the dispersion of its ignorance, the mind becomes conscious of the soul. Then it views the whole world in its consciousness as if it were situated in itself. The contented mind finds its body to be fully full of heavenly delight, which is never perceived by those living souls who are ensnared by their desires of worldly enjoyments. As trees burned by wildlife regain their green foliage with the return of spring, so people tormented by the troubles of the world and wasted by age and burden of life find their freshness in holy asceticism. Hermits resorting to the woods are freed from their fear of reincarnation and they have many joys which are beyond all description. Think, O man, can't be satisfied. Either your soul is dead to your carnal desires, or your desires are dead in your soul. In both cases, you are happy, whether in possession or extinction of your mind. Don't delay choosing whatever you think is more blissful for yourself, but it is better to possess your mind and kill your cares and desires than to kill your mind with the troublesome desires and anxieties. Know that what is painful to you is really nothingness, because it is foolish to part with something pleasant to yourself. If you have your inner understanding at all, remain true to yourself by avoiding the false chaos of the world. Life is a precious treasure, and its loss is liked by nobody. But I tell you in truth that this life is a dream and you are nothing in reality. Yet be not sorry that you live in vain, because you have lived such a nothingness before, and your existence is only a delusion. It is unreasonable to think yourself as being so and so, because the delusion of individual self existence is now exploded by right reason. Reason points towards the uniform entity of the identical being at all times. It is sheer irrationality that tells you of your existence. And it is the lack of true light that exhibits this darkness to you. Reason will disprove your entity as light removes darkness. It was in your irrationality, my friend, that you have passed all this time with the vain idea of your separate existence. It is only because of this irrationality of yours that your gross ignorance has grown so great as to be sad because of your disasters. Your delusive desires have subjected you to the devil like children caught by their imagined demons and ghosts. After one rids himself of his former states of pain and pleasure and his transitory desires in this temporary world, he comes to feel the delight of his soul under the province of his right reason. Your reason has wakened you from your dullness and enlightened your soul and mind with the light of truth. Therefore, we should bow down to reason above all others as the only enlightener of our hearts and souls. After desires are cleared from your heart, you shall find yourself as the great Lord of all. You shall rejoice in yourself under the pure and pristine light of your soul. Being freed from your desires, you are set on the footing of the sovereign Lord of all. The unreasonableness of desires growing in your ignorance will go away under the domain of reason. Whether you like it or not, your desires will fly from your mind under the dominion of your reason. Just as the deep darkness of night flies at the advance of daylight. The thorough extinction of your desires is attended with your perfect bliss. Therefore, rely on the conclusion of your nothingness by every mode of reason. When you have lorded over your mind and your organs and think yourself extinct at all times, you have secured every joy to your spirit forever. If your mind is freed from its disquiet and is set at rest and becomes extinct in your present state, it will not come back to life in the future when you shall have your spiritual trance forever. When I remain in my spiritual state, I seem to be in the fourth or highest heaven in myself. Hence, I forever discard my mind with its creation of the mental world. Only the soul is the self existent being, beside which there is nothing else in existence. I feel myself to be this very soul, and that there is nothing else beside myself. I find myself to be ever present everywhere with my intelligent soul and beaming forth with its light of consciousness. This we regard as the Supreme Soul, which is situated in the translucent sphere of our inner hearts. This soul, which is without its counterpart, is beyond our imagination and description. Therefore, I think of myself as this soul, not in the form of an image of it, but as a wave of water of that profound and unlimited ocean of the divine soul. When I rest in silence in that soul within myself, which is beyond what can be known and is identical with my consciousness itself. I find all my desires and passions together with my vitality and consciousness to be quite defunct in me. In the next chapter 84, Vitavya's tapas, his mental or imaginary worlds. Vasishtha continued, sage Vitavya, having thus reflected in his mind, renounced all his worldly desires, and sat in his hypnotic trance in a cave of the Vindhya mountains. His body became motionless and devoid of its pulsations. His soul shot forth with its intellectual delight. Then, with his calm and quiet mind, he sat in his penance like the still ocean in its calmness. His heart was cold and his breathing was stopped. He remained like a fire that has gone out after consuming its fuel. His mind withdrew from all objects of the physical senses and intensely fixed upon the object of his meditation. His eyes were almost closed under the slight pulsations of his eyelids. His slight and acute eyesight was fixed upon the top of his nose. His eyelids had the appearance of half opened lotus buds. The erect head and neck and body of the meditating sage gave him the appearance of a bas relief carved upon rock. Sitting in this posture in the Vindhya cave with his close attention on the Supreme Soul, he passed a period of 300 years as if only half a moment. The sage didn't perceive the flight of this length of time owing to the fixedness of his mind in his soul. Having obtained his liberation in his listless state, he didn't lose his life in his extreme tapas. All that time, nothing could rouse him from his profound samadhi trance. Not even the loud roar of a rainy clouds could break his entranced yogic sleep. Loud shouts and shots of soldiers and hunters, the cries and shrieks of the beasts and birds, and the growling and snarling of tigers and elephants on the hills could not break his profound samadhi. The loud roars of lions, the tremendous roars of waterfalls, the dreadful noise of thunder, and the swelling clamor of the people about him could not shake his firmness. The deep howling of furious, fantastic Sarab animals, the violent crackling of earthquakes, the harsh cracking of the woods on fire, and the dashing of waves and splashing of torrents upon the shore couldn't move him from his seat. The rush of waters falling on rocky shores, the clashing on the torrents dashing on each other, and the noise and heat of wildfires didn't disturb his samadhi. He continued only to breathe at his will to no purpose. Just as the course of time flows forever to no good to itself, all sides of his cave were washed over by the currents of rainwater resembling ocean waves. Soon he submerged under mud carried by floods of rainwater in the mountain caves of his tapas penance. Yet he continued to keep his seat in that dreary cell, buried as he was by mud up to his shoulders. The long period of 300 years had passed over him in this way when his soul was awakened to light under the pain of the rains of his mountain cell. His oppressed body then assumed its intellectual or spiritual form, the astral body, the lingde, which is a living, subtle body like air or light, but without its act of breathing vital energy. This subtle body grew by degrees to its rarefied form by its imagination. It became of the form of the inner mind, which was felt to reside within the heart. It thought in itself of having become a pure and living liberated sage, in which state it seemed to pass 100 years under the shade of a kadam tree in a romantic grove of Kailash mountain. It seemed to take the form of a Vidyadhar spirit for a century of years, in which state it was quite free from the disease of humanity. In next thought of becoming the great Indra, who is served by the celestials, and it's past full 5 yuga in that form. Ram said, let me ask you, sage, how could the mind of the sage conceive itself as Indra or a Vidyadhar whom it had never seen? How could it have any idea of extensive Mount Kailash or past many ages in its small space in the cave? This is impossible in nature, Vasishtha replied. Consciousness is all comprehending and all pervading. Wherever it exerts its power in any form, it immediately assumes that form by its own nature. Thus, undivided consciousness exhibits itself in various forms throughout the whole creation. It is the nature of consciousness to exhibit itself in any form as it represents itself in understanding. Its nature is to become whatever it pleases at any place or time. So the impersonal sage saw himself in various forms and personalities in all the worlds in the ample sphere of his consciousness within the narrow space of his heart. The man of perfect understanding has transformed his desires to detachment. The desires of men, like seeds of trees burned by the fire of intelligence, produce no germs of acts. He thought to be an attendant on the god Shiva, who wears the crescent moon on his forehead. He became acquainted with all the scenery, sciences, and the knowledge of all things, past, present, and future. Everything sees everything, everyone sees everything in the same manner on his outside as it is firmly impressed in his inner mind. But this sage, being freed from the impression of his personality in his lifetime, was at liberty to take upon himself whatever personality he chose. Ram said, I believe, O chief of sages, that the living liberated man who sits in this manner obtains the emancipation of his soul, even though he is confined in the prison house of his body. Such was the case of the self liberated sage of Vitahavya. Vasishtha answered, Ram, how can living liberated souls be confined to the body? They remain in the form of Brahma in the outward temple of his creation, which is pure and tranquil as air. Wherever the empty and airy consciousness represents itself in any form, it finds itself to be spread out there in that form. So many ideal worlds appear to be present before us. They are full with the presence of the all pervading Spirit of God. Thus, Vitavya, confined in the cave and submerged under mud, saw multitudes of worlds and countless unformed and ideal creations in the intellect of his great soul. First, he thought of himself as celestial Indra. Then he conceived himself to be an earthly ruler preparing to go hunting in some forest. At one time, this sage supposed himself to be the son of Brahma, and at another time, he became a chief among the Das hunters in the forest of Kailash. He who once thought himself to be a prince in the land of Susrut, sorry, Surastra, became as a forester in the village of the Andhras in Madras. Ram said, if the sage enjoyed heavenly bliss in his mind, what need did he have of assuming these ideal forms? Vashiji replied, why do you ask this question, Ram, when you have been repeatedly told that this world is a false creation of the divine mind? Creations of sage's mind were also false creations. The universe is the creation of divine consciousness. It is as unsubstantial as empty air. The ideal world of the human mind, being only a delusion, is the same. In truth, Ram, neither is that world, nor is this under any, nor is this other anything in reality. Neither you nor I have any essentiality in this non-essential world, which is filled only with the essence of God. The one is as the other at all times, whether past, present, or future. All this visible world is the fabric of the mind, which is only a copy of consciousness. Such is the whole creation, although it appears otherwise. Creation is only a transcendental vacuum, although it seems to be as firm as a diamond. It is its ignorance that the mind exhibits itself in the forms of the production, growth, and extinction of things, all of which are like the rise and swinging and sinking of waves in the ocean of eternal emptiness. All things are situated in the empty sphere of consciousness and are perceived by its representative of the mind in the form of the firm and extended cosmos, though it has no extension in reality. With this, chapter 84 comes to an end, and we rest our today's reading session here itself. We'll again meet with the reading of next section onward. Until then, Shivoham, friends.